There's someone you're thinking about right now, someone you could call, but you won't. And it's not because you're too busy or because the timing isn't right. It's because somewhere along the way, life started feeling slightly off in a way that's hard to explain to anyone, including yourself. Not dramatic, not tragic, just this subtle, persistent feeling that you're busy, but not progressing, moving, but not advancing. Like you're running on a treadmill that's disguised as a path forward. 2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher named Seneca saw this exact pattern unfolding in the lives of everyone around him. And what makes his observations so unsettling is that he wasn't some monk living in isolation. He was the tutor to Emperor Nero, one of the most powerful and corrupt leaders in history. He was wealthy, politically connected, deeply involved in the machinery of Roman society. And when Nero eventually turned on him and forced him to take his own life, Seneca spent his final hours not begging for mercy, but writing philosophy about how to live well and die with dignity. The 10 habits he warned about in his letters and essays are the same habits that are quietly destroying modern lives right now. And the reason these habits are so dangerous is because they don't announce themselves. They don't show up as obvious disasters. They just gradually hollow out your life from the inside until one day you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's definition of success while your actual life has been passing you by. By the end of this video, you're going to recognize at least 7 of these habits in your own life. And more importantly, you're going to understand exactly why you keep repeating them even though you know better, and what it actually takes to break free from patterns that have been running your life on autopilot for years or maybe decades. So let's start with the first habit that Seneca identified as the root cause of almost all human suffering. The first habit that's ruining your life without you realizing it is that you're not busy. You're scattered, and Seneca wrote extensively about this distinction because in his time, just like in ours, people confuse constant activity with meaningful progress. And he observed that the people who complained most about not having enough time were the same people who were spending hours on trivial conversations, pointless social obligations, and activities that brought them no joy or growth. They weren't lacking time. They were lacking focus, and the modern version of this is even more insidious because we've gamified distraction to the point where your attention is being pulled in 17 different directions simultaneously, and you think that's normal productivity. Think about your brain right now. It's like having 20 tabs open where each tab is a different worry, a different unfinished task, a different half-formed plan, and your real goals, the things that would actually change your life trajectory, are buried somewhere at the bottom of that mental stack where you never quite get to them because you're too busy responding to whatever's most urgent or most stimulating in the moment. The notifications, the constant context switching between work and social media and messages and email, the complete absence of deep, uninterrupted focus on anything that matters. This isn't a time management problem. This is a nervous system problem because your brain was not designed to process this volume of inputs. And what happens is you end up in this perpetual state of partial attention where you're never fully present with anything or anyone, which means you're never actually experiencing your life. You're just skimming the surface of it while feeling perpetually behind. Seneca's solution was ruthlessly simple. Decide what deserves your attention and give everything else a hard no. Not a maybe, not I'll get to it later, a complete no. Because every yes to something trivial is a no to something important, and most people are living entire lives of trivial yes that add up to one giant no to their actual potential. Here's the punchline that most people don't want to hear. You're not overwhelmed by how much you have to do. You're overwhelmed because you haven't decided what actually matters, so you're treating everything as equally important, which means nothing gets the focused, sustained attention it needs to actually produce results. And that's why you're busy but not progressing, moving but not advancing. And until you fix this foundational habit, nothing else is going to change. The second habit that's destroying you is believing everything your mind tells you. And Seneca had this incredible insight that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Because your brain is constantly producing what I call mental micromovies, where it takes incomplete information and fills in the gaps with the worst possible interpretation. So someone doesn't reply to your message, and within 60 seconds your brain has constructed an entire narrative about how they're ignoring you. They're upset with you, they're done with you, when in reality, they probably just saw your message while they were busy and forgot to respond. Your boss sends you an email asking to talk, and your mind immediately goes to "I'm in trouble. I'm getting fired. I did something wrong," when the email could be about literally anything. Or you get a headache, and instead of recognizing it as a normal human experience, your mind starts catastrophizing about brain tumors and serious illness. And the devastating part is that you're living two completely separate lives simultaneously. Your real life, which is usually fairly manageable and contains both challenges and joys, and your imagined life, which is a constant horror show of worst-case scenarios and catastrophic predictions that never actually happen. Think about how much energy you're spending in the imagined life, how many hours you've lost to worrying about conversations that never occurred, disasters that never materialized, rejections that never came. And here's what makes this habit so insidious. You don't believe everything you read online. You've learned to be skeptical of claims that sound too good to be true or information that comes from unreliable sources. But you believe everything your brain invents without any skepticism whatsoever, even though your brain is literally just making stuff up based on incomplete data and filtering it through your past traumas and insecurities. Seneca practiced what the Stoics called examining your impressions, which means when your mind presents you with a story about what something means, you pause and you ask, is this definitely true? Or is this just one possible interpretation among many? And what evidence do I actually have for this interpretation versus the 17 other ways I could interpret this situation? The reason most people never do this is because it requires admitting that you don't actually know what other people are thinking or what's going to happen in the future, and that uncertainty feels uncomfortable. So your brain fills in the uncertainty with stories that feel true because they're familiar, and then you live as if those stories are reality when they're just fiction your mind created to avoid sitting with not knowing. The third habit is one of the most psychologically sophisticated traps that exists, and it's turning your suffering into your identity. And Seneca understood this deeply because he watched people in Rome who were so attached to their pain and their problems that they actually resisted solutions because healing would mean losing a core part of who they believed themselves to be. This shows up in a modern world as statements like, "I'm just an anxious person. I'm bad at relationships. I have a tendency to self-sabotage. I'm not good with money." And what most people don't realize is that these aren't neutral descriptions of your current state. These are addresses. These are locations you've moved into and furnished and made comfortable. And the reason this is so dangerous is because once your pain becomes your identity, solutions become threats. If you're someone who identifies as anxious and then you start feeling calm, that calmness doesn't feel like relief. It feels unfamiliar and destabilizing because it contradicts your sense of self. So unconsciously, you create situations that generate anxiety because that's what feels like home. And this is why people can know exactly what they need to do to change their lives and still not do it. Because change would require becoming someone new, and becoming someone new means letting go of the familiar person you've been, even if that person is suffering. Seneca observed that people defend their suffering with more passion than they defend their happiness. And if you really pay attention to your own psychology, you'll see this is true. When something good happens, you're suspicious. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're not letting yourself fully enjoy it because you don't trust it. But when something confirms your negative beliefs about yourself or your life, you grab onto it immediately as proof that you were right all along. The way out of this trap is to recognize that you are not your patterns. You're not your history. You're not even your current personality. Those are all just temporary formations that can be changed. And every time you hear yourself saying, "That's just how I am," you need to add the word "currently," because "that's just how I am" currently leaves room for evolution. But "that's just how I am" turns your current state into a permanent identity that you'll unconsciously protect even when it's destroying you. The question Seneca would ask is, if you woke up tomorrow and all your familiar suffering was gone, who would you be without it? And for most people, that question is terrifying because they've organized their entire life around their pain. Their relationships are built on shared suffering. Their self-understanding is rooted in their struggles. And the idea of letting that go feels like death, even though it's actually birth. The fourth habit that's ruining your life is keeping people who drain you. And Seneca was very clear that you become like the company you keep. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who are constantly negative, constantly dramatic, constantly needing something from you without ever giving anything back, you're not being a good friend or a good person, you're being a volunteer victim. Here's a simple test that Seneca would approve of. When you see someone's name pop up on your phone, notice what happens in your body. Do your shoulders relax, or do they tighten? Do you feel a little lift of genuine excitement, or do you feel a subtle dread that you immediately try to rationalize away by telling yourself you should want to talk to them? Most people are experiencing energy leaks all day long, little drips of emotional water that don't seem like a big deal in a moment, but over months and years they drain your entire reservoir. And you wonder why you're exhausted, why you don't have energy for your goals, why you feel depleted at the end of every day. And it's because you're giving your life force to people who don't value it and probably aren't even conscious that they're taking it. The truth that nobody wants to say out loud is that being lonely around the wrong people is infinitely worse than being alone. Because at least when you're alone, you're not pretending, you're not performing, you're not contorting yourself to fit someone else's expectations or to manage their emotions or to make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. Seneca spent time with people who challenged him intellectually, who inspired him to be better, who could hold philosophical conversations and weren't constantly pulling him in a petty drama. And he was ruthless about limiting his time with people who drained him, even if those people were powerful or influential. Because he understood that your energy is your most valuable resource. And if you're giving it away to people who don't appreciate it or reciprocate it, you're betraying yourself. The way to know if you need to make changes in your relationships is to notice if you're different around certain people, not in the natural way where you have different dynamics with different friends, but in the way where you're suppressing parts of yourself, where you're walking on eggshells, where you're constantly monitoring what you say to avoid triggering them, where you feel smaller or less yourself after spending time with them. And if that's happening consistently with someone, that relationship is costing you more than it's worth regardless of history or obligation or guilt. The fifth habit is confusing productivity with progress. And this is the modern hamster wheel where you have a completely full calendar but completely empty meaning. You're checking things off lists, you're attending meetings, you're responding to emails, but doing all the things that look like productivity. But if someone asked you what you're actually building toward, what your life is about, what you're trying to create or become, you wouldn't have a clear answer because you've been so busy with motion that you never stop to ask about direction. Seneca distinguished between activity and purpose, and he observed that most people are incredibly active with their lives but have no guiding purpose, so they're just responding to whatever demands come at them. Whoever needs something, whatever feels urgent, and decades pass, and they realize they built someone else's dream. They live someone else's priorities. They optimized someone else's definition of success, while their own life remained unlived. The power line that summarizes this entire habit is that being busy is the laziest form of existence because it allows you to avoid the much harder work of figuring out what you actually want and then reorganizing your entire life around that instead of around other people's expectations and society's default path. Here's a test that will reveal whether you're stuck in this pattern. Can you sit in silence for 5 minutes without reaching for your phone, without needing to do something, without feeling this urgent pull to be productive or entertained or stimulated? And if you can't, if sitting in silence feels uncomfortable or boring or makes you anxious, it's because you're avoiding a question that emerges when the noise stops. And that question is usually some version of, is this it? Is this what I'm doing with my one life? Am I just going to keep moving without advancing until I run out of time? Seneca would say that most people don't live, they're merely getting ready to live. They're always in preparation mode, always waiting for conditions to be right, always one step away from actually starting the life they want, and then they die having never actually lived because they confuse the preparation with the thing itself. They confuse being busy with being purposeful, and that's the tragedy of a life spent in motion without direction. Most people try to fix these habits with motivation, with discipline, with trying harder and pushing through, but motivation doesn't fix unconscious patterns, and discipline only works for so long when you're fighting against subconscious programming that's been running your life for decades. If you truly want to change your internal programming, not just your surface behavior, not just what you do, but why you do it, and what beliefs are driving those actions, I highly recommend the subconscious millionaire system. And I'm bringing this up now because what we're really talking about in these habits is the gap between knowing better and doing better. And that gap exists in your subconscious mind where all your automatic patterns live. This system is specifically about rewiring limiting beliefs at the root level, breaking hidden mental loops that keep you repeating the same patterns, and rebuilding your identity from the inside out so that the changes you make are permanent instead of just another temporary burst of willpower that fades after a few weeks. The link is in the description if you're serious about internal change rather than just surface-level improvement. But let's keep going because the next 5 habits are where this gets even more revealing. The 6th habit that's destroying your peace is living for an audience that doesn't exist, and Seneca wrote about this extensively because he saw how much suffering people created for themselves by imagining that everyone was watching them, judging them, keeping score of their failures and successes, when in reality, everyone is far too busy thinking about themselves to spend much time thinking about you. This is what psychologists now call the spotlight effect, which is the cognitive bias where you dramatically overestimate how much other people notice or care about what you're doing, and the truth is that nobody is watching you. They're not analyzing your outfit or your career choices or whether you said something awkward in that conversation 3 days ago. They're worried about their own lives, their own insecurities, their own fears about being judged. Seneca's observation was that we suffer more from opinion than reality, meaning the pain isn't coming from what people actually think, it's coming from what you imagine they think, and you're performing for an empty room. You're exhausting yourself trying to impress judges who aren't there or don't care or whose opinions wouldn't matter even if they were paying attention. Think about how many decisions you've made based on what other people might think, how many opportunities you didn't pursue because you were worried about judgment, how many times you've edited yourself or hidden parts of who you are because you were afraid of how it would look. And now think about how much of that fear was based on actual evidence versus just your imagination running wild with worst-case scenarios. The freedom that comes from really internalizing this is profound, because once you realize that you're the one creating the judgment in your own mind and projecting it onto other people, you can stop performing and start living. You can make choices based on what actually matters to you rather than what you think will impress or please or satisfy the imaginary audience in your head. Seneca practiced this by regularly reminding himself that other people's opinions were outside his control and therefore not worth his emotional energy. And the only opinion that mattered was his own assessment of whether he was living with integrity and virtue. And that internal standard couldn't be shaken by external criticism because it wasn't dependent on anyone else's judgment. And that's the kind of freedom that's available when you stop living for imaginary judges and start living by your own values. The 7th habit is what Seneca would call the win disease, and it shows up as statements like, when I have more money, then I'll start living. When I lose weight, then I'll put myself out there. When I'm more ready, then I'll take the risk. When things calm down, then I'll focus on what matters. And what makes this so dangerous is that it sounds like reasonable planning. It sounds like you're being responsible and strategic. But what you're actually doing is postponing your life indefinitely, because the conditions you're waiting for are never going to be perfect. Seneca distinguished between procrastination, which is delaying specific tasks, and the win disease, which is delaying your entire life. And he observed that people can be incredibly productive and busy while simultaneously postponing everything that actually matters. They're checking off items on their to-do list while their real dreams remain forever in the someday category. The devastating line that Seneca wrote is, while you postpone, life passes. And what he means is that you're waiting for some future moment when everything will be aligned and ready. But that moment is an illusion. It's never going to come. And meanwhile, the only moment you actually have, which is right now, is slipping away unlived because you're treating it as preparation time rather than as life itself. The win disease is really fear disguised as wisdom. It's your mind creating very logical sounding reasons why now isn't the right time. And those reasons are designed to protect you from the discomfort and vulnerability of actually going for what you want and potentially failing or being rejected or discovering that you're not as capable as you hoped. So it's safer to stay in the waiting room indefinitely, where you can maintain the fantasy that you could do the thing if conditions were right, rather than risk finding out what would happen if you actually tried. Seneca's solution was to treat every day as if it might be your last, not in a morbid way, but in a way that creates urgency and clarity about what deserves your time and attention today, not someday. And when you really internalize that you don't have unlimited time, that someday might never come, that the conditions are never going to be perfect, you stop waiting and you start living. And that shift from when to now is what separates people who have rich, full, meaningful lives from people who die with their dreams still in the planning stages. The eighth habit is the I'll be happy when trap. And this is closely related to the when disease, but it's specifically about conditioning your happiness on external achievements. So you tell yourself, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I have the relationship, when I reach the income goal, when I have the body. And what happens is you achieve the thing and you feel good for about 48 hours. And then you're right back to baseline. And instead of questioning the entire premise, you just set a new goalpost and keep running on the same treadmill, expecting different results. Seneca's principle was that wealth is not having more, but needing less. And he was extraordinarily wealthy, so he knew from direct experience that accumulating more money, more status, more possessions doesn't change your baseline level of contentment, because contentment is an internal state, not a result of external conditions. And if you can't be at peace with what you have right now, you won't be at peace with more either. You'll just have more elaborate reasons to be dissatisfied. This is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, which is your brain's tendency to return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events. So you get the thing you've been chasing, and it briefly feels amazing, and then it becomes your new normal, and you're looking for the next hit of achievement to feel that high again. And this is why people can achieve everything they thought they wanted and still feel empty, because they were chasing the wrong thing. They were trying to get external stuff to fill an internal void, and external stuff can never do that. It can only distract you temporarily from the fact that the void is still there. The power line that captures this is that peace that depends on something is negotiation, not peace. Meaning if your sense of okayness requires certain conditions to be met, certain things to go your way, certain achievements to be reached, then you're constantly negotiating with life, constantly one bad day or one setback away from losing your peace. And that's not peace, that's fragility disguised as happiness. This is exactly why most people never experience real financial or emotional freedom. Because the real shift isn't earning more money or achieving more success. It's removing the subconscious scarcity patterns that keep moving the finish line, that keep telling you you're not enough, that you don't have enough, that you need more before you can be happy or secure or worthy. That's what the subconscious millionaire dives into, how your internal money blueprint controls your entire life, how your subconscious beliefs about worthiness and abundance and what you deserve are running the show beneath your conscious awareness. And until you address those programs at the subconscious level, you're going to keep chasing the next thing thinking it will finally be enough. And it never will be, because the problem isn't what you have. It's how you're programmed to perceive it. If you feel stuck in this next thing loop, if you're exhausted from chasing goalposts that keep moving, check the link below, because this system gives you the tools to break that pattern at its source. The ninth habit is what I call the firefighter syndrome, where you solve everyone's problems but ignore your own. And Seneca would recognize this immediately as a form of avoidance disguised as virtue, because helping other people feels noble and necessary, and it gives you a sense of purpose. But what's actually happening is you're using other people's problems as a way to avoid facing your own. This shows up as being the person everyone calls when they need something, being the one who's always available, always reliable, always putting everyone else first. And on the surface, that looks like selflessness, but underneath, it's often a pattern where being needed feels safer than being vulnerable, where focusing on other people's chaos means you don't have to address your own, where giving yourself away piece by piece feels easier than the hard work of building a life that's actually yours. The question Seneca would ask is who takes care of you, who makes sure your needs are met, who protects your time and energy and space. And for most people trapped in this pattern, the answer is nobody, because they've trained everyone around them to see them as an infinite resource that never needs anything in return. Pay attention to your body, because it knows the truth even when your mind is rationalizing. Notice when your body says no, but your mouth says yes. Notice the tension in your chest when you agree to something you don't want to do, Notice the exhaustion that comes from constantly managing other people's emotions while suppressing your own. And ask yourself honestly if this pattern is serving you or if it's slowly draining the life out of you. Seneca's observation was that you wouldn't give away your money as carelessly as you give away your time and energy. You wouldn't just hand cash to everyone who asked without thinking about whether you could afford it or whether they deserved it. But you do exactly that with your life force. And then you wonder why you feel depleted, why you don't have anything left for your own dreams, why you feel resentful even though you're the one who keeps saying yes. The way out of this trap is to recognize that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. And if people in your life can't handle you having boundaries, that tells you everything you need to know about whether those relationships are based on genuine care or just convenience. The 10th and final habit is the most dangerous one because it's the meta habit that allows all the others to continue, and it's knowing without acting. And if you're honest with yourself right now, you already knew most of what I've covered in this video. You already recognize these patterns in your own life. You've already had the insights. You've already understood intellectually what needs to change. But understanding hasn't translated into action, and that gap between knowing and doing is where life is lost. Seneca himself was full of contradictions. He wrote about simple living while being one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He wrote about integrity while serving a tyrant. He wrote about mortality while clinging to life, and far from discrediting his philosophy. Those contradictions make him more credible because he understood from personal experience how hard it is to live according to your values, how easy it is to know better and still not do better. And his writing is so powerful precisely because it comes from someone who is struggling with the same gaps that we all struggle with. The tragedy isn't ignorance. The tragedy is inaction. It's having all the information you need to change your life and choosing not to use it. It's recognizing the patterns that are destroying you and then going right back to repeating them because change is uncomfortable and the familiar pain of your current life feels safer than the unknown territory of who you might become if you actually committed to transformation. Seneca wrote that we're not given a short life. We make it short by wasting it. And you're at a choice point right now. You can watch this video, feel temporarily inspired, recognize yourself in these habits, and then tomorrow go right back to the same patterns. Or you can decide that this is the moment where knowing finally translates into action, where awareness finally becomes change, where you stop negotiating with your potential and start actually claiming it. Tomorrow morning before you touch your phone, before you check anything, before the noise and the roles and habits kick in, you'll have about 3 seconds where you're just conscious, just awake, just present before your identity reassembles itself and you become the person you were yesterday. And in those 3 seconds, you have a choice that most people never consciously make. You can repeat or you can begin. If you want help rewiring the deeper patterns that keep you stuck in these habits, if you're ready to stop negotiating with your life and start actually living it, if you're done with knowing better but not doing better, then start with the subconscious millionaire system, because that system addresses the gap between knowing and doing by working at the subconscious level where your automatic patterns live. And it gives you the tools to reprogram those patterns so that the changes you make are permanent instead of just another cycle of temporary motivation followed by regression. The link is in the description, but the decision is yours. And that decision isn't about whether to click a link, it's about whether you're willing to become someone new, because you can't change your life without changing yourself. You can't break these habits while staying the person who formed them. And that's the real work that Seneca was pointing to, not just behavior modification, but identity. Transformation, not just doing different things, but becoming a different person, and that's uncomfortable and it's uncertain, and it's going to require you to let go of familiar patterns that feel like home, even though they're destroying you. But the alternative is spending the rest of your life knowing what these 10 habits are doing to you and choosing to keep them anyway. And that's not tragedy, that's choice, so make a different one.